Ryan, thanks for being here.
Of course.
Ryan is a multiple times New York Times bestseller author with amazing 90 books now on his 8-year career, more or less, including The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, and Now Stillness is the Key. And his work retains a cult following among NFL coaches, world-class athletes, and political leaders. He's also a major strategist who already worked with names like Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins. He dropped out of college at the age of 19 and became a apprentice from Robert Greene, who wrote The 48 Laws of Power. In his early 20s, he was marketing director at a billion-dollar company at the time, American Apparel. He's one of my favorite authors, and he's going to be with us on December 7 at Crafty Talks in São Paulo. Thank you again.
Of course.
I'm very excited to have you here. Your work really changed my life and the way that I think about everything. And of course, one of my components to build my company. And so, can we consider this new book a part of kind of trilogy of two previous books on Stoicism, Obstacle is the Way and Ego is the Enemy? How this book is related with these two?
Yeah, so it wasn't an intentional trilogy, but it sort of became one. So The Obstacle is the Way came out in 2014, Ego in 2016, and then this comes out this year, so it'd be 2019. The idea being what happens when you remove ego. What's left is sort of a quieter, calmer, more peaceful you. Conversely, what do you need to think clearly about obstacles? What do you need to persevere through things? What do you need to endure difficulty? You need a sort of an inner stillness. And if you don't have that, not only do you tend to make better decisions, but you tend to get exhausted, you tend to get overwhelmed, you tend to just not think about things the right way. So I felt like at the core of all of the books that I've written, this idea of stillness is important. And as I sort of read through all these different philosophical works and looked at all these different philosophies, you tended to find, whether they were Eastern or Western or ancient or modern, this idea of stillness is ultimately sort of a through line contained within all of them. And so I was just fascinated by that idea. It's something I feel like I need more of in my own life. I've yet to meet someone who says I have too much stillness in my life, So that's the book, yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. How important is the process to keep a journal for you?
I mean, it's really important. I do it every single morning. I actually do it in 3 different journals. I have a 3-year-old son, and we actually just started him on it. He sort of tells me things, and I write them down. I think it's important for a couple reasons. I think it's the act of just sort of memorializing your experience is important. But I think it's primarily a device to take sort of destructive emotions or anxieties or fears or just issues you're going through in your life and to process them outside of your own head, right? Like these things bouncing around in our own heads is often destructive, it's often painful, it's often unclear, even contradictory. But when you sit and write them down, it forces you by definition, because your face is here and your paper is here, like to create just even a very artificial and minuscule amount of distance between you and your thoughts. And then you can reflect on them, you can process them, and then, you can also go back and look at them. I keep one diary that I really like, a journal that's called a 1-line-a-day journal, and you just write 1 sentence per day. And so I could see where I was last year, the year before that. And I like just to be able to see the evolution that I'm on and whether I'm making the same mistakes again, whether I'm changing, whether I'm getting better. Am I just doing the same thing over and over again? So I think it's just a really important practice. And it happens that at the core of Stoicism, there is journaling. Like Marcus Aurelius' meditation is a journal.
A journal for himself.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's I think if all these people in history did it, it's probably for a reason, and if I think it's worth trying for people.
Cool. It's hard to keep to maintain the discipline to doing this. Sometimes you fall out of the wagon.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the reasons I often recommend people start with the 1-line-a-day one is that it's just 1 line a day. I forget who it is, but some behavioral psychologist was saying, if you want to start flossing, just floss 1 tooth. Just pick the smallest, increment. So I think everyone can do 1 line a day. very few people can write 10 pages a day, you know. So I think that's one way to do it. And then I created a journal about 2 years ago called the Daily Stoic Journal, which is a different way of doing it, which is you meditate on an idea in the morning and then you reflect on how you did with that sort of intention or that challenge in the evening. And so that process can work too. I think it's about creating kind of a ritual, a process. It's not like I journal and I just do it when I have time. It's that I do it in the morning before I start work, you know,
Okay.
and putting it at a place in my day makes it harder for me
Like
to not
brush
do
your
it.
teeth.
Yeah, you brush your teeth in the morning and you brush your teeth at night. That's when you do it. If it was like, hey, make sure you brush your teeth at some point throughout the day, you'd always be able to push it to later, right? And then eventually you'd fall asleep and not do it.
Okay. So in your book, you bring the amazing story about Tiger Woods, that he had a really tough mind in sports, but on the other hand, it maybe cost his peace of mind about the other things with sex addict. Can you talk a little bit about it and how can we fight with our demons?
Yeah,
Inner
so
demons?
the story I'm telling in Stillness, I basically, stillness to me is a place or a virtue that you have to tackle from a couple different directions, right? There's mental stillness, like how do you act under pressure? There's physical stillness, like can you sit still, you know, that sort of thing. But then most importantly, I think there's a kind of a spiritual stillness. There are lots of people who are very good at, say, trading stocks and they have a sort of mental stillness about it, but then they go home and they live a depraved or a miserable life because spiritually they're bankrupt, right? And so what I think Tiger Woods is a great example of someone who is incredibly disciplined on the golf course, you know, physically also incredibly disciplined,
Yeah.
but spiritually he had gone astray, and ultimately you can't keep those things segregated. Eventually, you know, one sort of overwhelms the other, and that's what happened with him. And I think I'm not picking on him exactly. I'm saying that this is a problem we all have, right?
Yeah.
You can practice meditation and have this practice, but then if you go out in the world and you act in a very un-Buddhist-like way, you're sort of undermining the power of this practice that you have. And so I think that people think with Tiger Woods that the demon was sex, and that was, but I would argue maybe that was the symptom of the larger demon, which is that there was just, he had this sort of relentless and unending desire to dominate and have more than anyone else, to have everything he wanted, right?
Because he felt that he suffered a lot, so he deserves that. Something
Yeah,
like this.
exactly. And he said, like, look, I'd worked so hard for this. I became the best in the world. Why shouldn't I get what I want? And well, the answer would be you have a wife and children. The answer would be you don't actually like this, you know? Like, but his father had told him, his father actually referred to the word enough growing up as the E word. That that was a curse word almost to be like, I'm good, I have enough. And so obviously on the one hand, this makes you a great champion, because a champion has to always want more, always want to get better. But as a human being, this is a very miserable way to live. And so I think what Tiger Woods illustrates is what happens when you get...
And he never used the word, right?
Yes. And what happens, Tiger Woods is a great example of what happens when you fall completely out of balance, when you're totally skewed. And again, it made him a great golfer, but then when the balance flipped and he destroyed what he built, it took him more than a decade, and he still really hasn't recovered. So it's a very dangerous strategy. It can work short term, but long term I don't think it's sustainable.
And this reminds me of the story about the inner wounded child.
Yeah, you got to know, and I'm not saying this as someone who's somehow cured myself. I'm saying, like, we all have sort of wounds from our childhood, or we all have things that we've gone through in our life that make us sort of manifest themselves or pop up in our lives now. And so when you find yourself getting irrationally upset about something, irrationally attached to something, when you have some sort of deep aversion, you often can step back and go, is this like, this isn't me now that's feeling this.
Functional adult.
Yes, this isn't the functional adult. This is me as a 9-year-old, right? I tell the story of Judd Apatow in the book, the movie producer, and he's getting in these knockdown, drag-out fights at the movie studio, and he realizes that he's made them into his parents, right? Is divorcing controlling parents, and he's like, so the movie studio is saying, hey, maybe the movie should be 10 minutes shorter, and he's saying, you don't get to tell me what to do, like I hate you,
he
Dad.
felt like his parents are.
Yeah, and I have that in my own life, and I think we all have that in our own life. So again, part of this, it's stillness isn't something you just get by meditating. It's not something you get by like just removing distractions from your life, because often the source of the disturbances or the unhappiness that we have is some spiritual or emotional or psychological issue that we have to go get treatment for, or that you have to really sit and think about and work on. You have to get control of yourself in a way where the functional adult comforts the wounded inner child, so the inner child is not making decisions. It's really bad when in Judd Apatow's case, you can't have an 11-year-old making decisions on a $200 million movie. That's just like not a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. You talk about treatment, and you did yourself a treatment when you were kind of workaholic.
Yeah.
Some years ago.
I go to therapy. I've done some Workaholics Anonymous work. I think I sort of picked up from my childhood this sense that like you can earn your parents' love, or you can earn their approval, or you can sort of earn that sense of self-worth. And that's sort of a contradiction in terms, right? You can't earn any of that stuff. And so what happens is you go, oh, hey, if I write a book, or hey, if I become successful in business, or I make a lot of money, or I become a politician and I win office, then I'll earn I'll earn this, or I'll feel good. And you do get rewards for it, so it kind of addresses that problem. But you find that it doesn't get you all the way there. So then you kind of do what Tiger Woods says. One championship was nice. I need another one, and another one, and another one. And you can really,
This desire that's never satisfied.
It never can. It never can be satisfied, because you're trying to solve one problem with a totally unrelated solution. And so, yeah, it's just a process, and you have to be willing to you have to be willing to understand that you're not going to fix your personal problems with professional success. And I think you've got to realize that your personal problems will ultimately undermine or jeopardize the professional success that you want.
In your book, you have a chapter called Enough. So much of our mental problems came from the notion that we are not enough, that we don't have enough.
Sure.
How to get away from these feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I think
with this stillness or stoicism.
The problem is people say, hey, if I make $1 million, then I'll feel rich, right? Because they don't feel rich now. And then they get $1 million and they start to see other people have $1 million, and they realize, oh, this isn't that much money. Actually, $10 million, $100 million. Or, if I win a Super Bowl, then I'll feel big and successful and powerful. And then they realize, oh, wait, some people have won this multiple times. And it becomes this sort of endless, the goalpost is constantly being moved. And it's just not a good way to live, And so you have to find ultimately what you should be working for. What is the goal you're working towards, is what success is to you, something that's in your control, right? So is it like, for me as a writer, my success cannot be how many copies of the books that I sell, because one, I don't control that. Like, things can intervene, right?
Another book came out with more publicity.
Yeah, and what I think is a large number can immediately be beaten by another person who I also don't control. So, you tell yourself, hey, if you sell 1 million copies, that's success. And then some guy you went to school with comes out with a book that sells 10 million copies, and now all of a sudden the thing you should have been happy with no longer seems so special. So instead you have to go like, well, what's success to me? Success is realizing my potential, is getting better. Success is saying what I wanted to say. Success is having the impact that I wanted to have. You've got to change your goal. That's not to say you don't also want the extra things and you don't enjoy them when you get them, but your enough cannot be an external thing that other people have influence over. If your goal is to win a Nobel Prize as a scientist, that's wonderful. But the problem is, the Nobel Prize Committee decides whether you're worthy of the prize or not. And so think about all the people who didn't get a Nobel Prize because they were a woman, because they were black, because they were Jewish, because they were from this country or that country. Like the Nobel Prize Committee is just been revealed to have like this massive sexual harassment like these are corrupt but also just imperfect institutions, and so your goal
like
should
that time that they gave you for the guy who made the lobotomy.
Yes, right. And you zoom out and it's like, what is the Nobel Prize? It's like the guy that invented dynamite was feeling guilty about his impact on humanity. So but the point is, look, it's a better goal to say like, I want to make something, like I want to accomplish X that may or may not make me worthy of a Nobel Prize, but you have to have the discipline to say like, my aim, it's like, my aim is to throw a perfect game, not to win the game, or you know what I mean? Like, what's the part you control?
It's very similar of the definition from success of John Wooden.
Mm-hmm.
Success is the peace of mind that you do everything that you can among your potential or something.
Yes, of course, all easy to say, harder to do if you're a competitive person, if you're a driven person, if you're a talented person. But I think what's at stake here is sort of personal happiness.
Okay, cool. I've read an article where you wrote about how to get rid of our cell phones.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Sometimes you feel suffocated or addicted to your cell phone yourself. And how to restart our relationship with this device? And I'm actually about to, really is a personal interesting question because I'm feeling really addicted.
I mean, look, I said it right here because like I don't want it, like we are totally addicted to our devices. And we should take some consolation in the fact that the device is designed to make us addicted to it, right?
For the smartest person in those people
yes,
in the world.
Of course, right. Like so I've thought of a couple things more recently that I've started to do. So my new thing is I don't sleep with the phone in my room. I think that's a nice, easy strategy. So like at the very least, you're getting 8 hours away from your phone or whatever it is. And then my thing is I don't touch my phone for the first 1 hour that I'm awake. And oftentimes I go longer than that, but I don't touch the phone for 1 hour. So this morning I went for a bike ride with my son, I had breakfast with my wife, started to drive into town, and I picked up my phone for the first time when I got close enough that I needed directions to where I was going, right? So having that sort of artificial distance between the devices has been really good. A couple of things like I don't have any social media on my phone. So I still have things that I use it for, but I don't also have like it's like not only is the phone designed to be addictive, but then the services inside the phone are designed to be addictive. And so what can you limit those for? And a big one for me was I don't really follow the news. Like I think being informed is important. I think following the news in real time is not important. And so I think, if you ask people what they use their phone for, it's primarily social media and the news and then work. And so if you can limit those, my phone is primarily for work, right? And so if there's work, I'm using it, and if not, I'm doing other work.
Do you think that you are losing something to get distracted not in a sense of personal life, but for work itself? Because if you are creating relationships through social media or putting more of your life on there.
So I still use social media. I just don't use it on my phone. So the idea is like I want to be intentional about when I use it and how I use it. What I don't want is to always be using it, or I think the other way to think about it is like it's using you, right?
Yeah.
Like these giant networks.
It's like the Fight Club sentence.
Yes. You're the product on social media, right? And so I want to use it, but I don't want it to be using me. And so I want to have some distance. If I'm sitting down in front of a computer and I'm posting something related to my work, great. What I don't want to do is if you say, oh, hey, I have to go grab something, and then I'm like, well, let me check this, right? Like I want to create some roadblocks between that sort of impulsive, mindless use.
Okay, so 2 weeks ago, I was talking with Mark Manson.
Yes.
He made an interview here.
Really?
Yeah.
In Austin?
No, here on the podcast.
Oh, got it.
He was in Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And I met him there. He's an amazing writer, of course. His book has sold more than 1 million copies in Brazil.
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
90 million copies around the world.
Yeah.
And I talked with him because he never put anything on social media. And on the other hand, there are some guys like Gary Vee
Sure.
putting everything on social media, and this Gary Vee line, it seems like the right thing to do if you are not a huge great author. Because he said, I see value if you don't put a lot of things. The people who I like put things in a couple of years, great things. But if you are not think that you are able to make a masterpiece, it's easier to put more content.
Yeah, I guess
what do you
that's true.
think? How to balance this thing as a creative person, an entrepreneur in digital marketing?
I think we have to grant that there's different personality types. The writer type is usually a bit more introverted, is usually has to think much bigger picture, has to do what Cal Newport calls deep work. And then someone like Gary, I think Gary, who I love, is an extroverted person. He inspires people. He energizes them. He's sort of like a lead from the front kind of guy. And so different strategies work for different brands. Also, different strategies work for different messages that you're trying to get across. If Mark is writing a book about how not to give a fuck, it would seem kind of weird if he gave a fuck about about social media. And with me, I try to write big picture stuff. I try to write thoughtful things. I try to write things that stand the test of time. So Twitter's not my ideal medium for
your
content.
ideal platform.
Yeah, and neither is Instagram. And also, there's a real cost to me or Mark or someone else using those things, right? Like, I think we've seen now with a couple CEOs that have gotten really caught up in social media, their business tends to suffer, right? Because they get so caught up in following this endless thing, and it becomes a feedback loop. The more popular you are, the more interesting thing that's happening, the more controversy you whip up, the more news coverage you're getting. And it's like, look, you have like a business to run. And for me, it's like every minute I'm spending, responding to comments on Instagram is time I'm not spending writing. And I just feel like lots of people can spend time on Instagram, and fewer people can write the books that I'm writing. So that's where I'm gonna, spend my energy.
Yeah, it is a bizarre thing, because what makes you being a success on Instagram, then you start to use the Instagram and you stop to doing the thing that make your success in the first place.
I think that's a timeless, look, when you become a successful writer, the first thing people want is they want to interview you. They want you to give talks.
Gigs.
Yeah, they want you to consult on things. They want you to, hey, have you thought about writing a movie? And so you spent your whole life wanting to write books, and then you have all these interesting opportunities, some of which are even more lucrative than writing, that are not that thing. And you have to have a discipline, you have to have a sense of purpose, and you have to know what's important to you. Because if what was important to you was to make a lot of money, then you should leave writing and go do these other things. If what was important to you was writing a certain kind of book or having a certain impact through books, you have to have the discipline to be like, sorry, I can't do that, or I can't do that for less than X, And so I think Mark's a great example of someone who's been really disciplined about that stuff, and clearly it's been reflected in the books.
Another good point on the book is when you encourage us to enter in relationships.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's so easy to be selfish and spend all that money, our money and our time in ourselves. Nevertheless, relationships still give you what give a sense of everything.
Sure.
On the other hand, some people like Marina Abramovic that you bring on the book decide to devote her energy to her art. How do you know to develop the self-awareness to know when you go to one side on the other or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously people should be free to live their lives however they want to live them without judgment, but I do tend to find there is this sort of myth or this sort of insidious belief that to be successful at what you want to do, it must come at the expense of relationships. So you see really talented writers who are either, always single, or I think worse, you see really talented writers who are just sort of monsters in their personal lives. The truth is, when you look at the people we really, really admire who did really great work, is that that's not who they were, right? And when you ask them, I imagine when they were on their deathbed, what they were thinking about, what they were truly proud of, was not, how much money they made or how many, times they topped the charts. It was the family that they raised, the people they were in relationships with. And especially when life gets really hard, right? When we fail, when we have health issues, when we get, when we mess up, that's when you want a relationship. And so I guess what I was trying to do in the book is talk about how not only are relationships not that, but doing big, scary, isolating things can actually be improved by having someone or lots of people that you depend on, right? The line for authors is like, each kid you have is a book you don't write. Or they say like the most dangerous enemy to good art is the stroller, and so I think people think about that, and then I think they miss like what you have on your arm, the idea of memento mori. Like, look, like you die and that's it. You don't take the books with you when you go. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't do Melville any good that people are still reading Moby Dick. Like, he's dead. Shakespeare doesn't get anything out of the fact that his plays are still being performed. He's fucking dead, And so what are you going to do while you're here, to me is the question. And I'm not that excited by posthumous fame. So if I have to leave some success on the table, but I get the benefit of, the bike ride that my son and I went on this morning, or, the experience we had driving to school today, I would trade that in 2 seconds.
Okay, sounds great. Let's change the subject a little bit more for our marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How much are you involved with the marketing of your own work? Everything is your responsibility?
I'm very involved in the sense that, unlike most authors, like, is also what I do and have done professionally. So I know how it works. And I do it for other clients all the time. But I also know, there's this expression, a fool who represents himself, only a fool represents himself. So I do want to work with talented people who see things that I can't see, I can delegate to, who have contacts and relationships I don't have. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like the creator has to be the CEO of the launch and the sales of whatever they're doing. So can you have a CMO? Can you have an outside publicist? Sure. But if you're not setting the strategic priorities, if you're not intricately involved in what's happening, it's not going to be, no one is going to care about selling your thing as much as you care. And so I'm not just going to hand the marketing off of my book to the publisher. Even though they make more per copy than the author does, I care more and I know it better. And it says something if I'm going to be out, asking for favors and pitching, and you know what I mean? Like, it says something if I'm not. So at the end of the day, you have to be very, very, very involved. And if you're not, I think maybe it says something about the quality of the work and whether you believe in it or not.
What do you think about the online courses market? It's a good market for you, because I've listening an interview with you from James Altucher.
Yeah.
When you speak that, 5 years ago, your sales is more like a hardcovers and paperback.
Yeah.
And then hardcovers, paperback, and audiobooks.
Yeah.
And now you're thinking about this kind of course things.
Well, yeah. So when I first started, it was like 50% physical, 20% ebook. It was primarily physical. Then ebooks started getting really popular. Then audiobooks started getting really popular. And then courses too. Like, I wrote this book, The Daily Stoic, which is like 1 page of Stoic philosophy every day, and it's done very, very well. But we also do a daily email. It's dailystoic.com/email. I think we've sent out 30 million of the emails. You know what I mean? Because we send it out every day, so it's a lot of emails. But we've reached far more people from the emails than we have from the book. And then we've also started to do challenges, like every quarter or so. We're going to do one in January that's like a Daily Stoic challenge. So it's like 21 days or 14 days of like Stoic inspired sort of like exercises, right? And what I found with those is that, again, you're reaching different people. You might even be able to reach the same people in a different medium at a different price point. But ultimately for authors, specifically, I don't know how much of your audience really cares about the nuts and bolts of this, but like, okay, if I sell an audiobook, a publisher takes the largest commission of that. If I sell an ebook, same thing, physical, same thing. If I create something off the back of the book, whether it's a challenge or a course or a digital product, I take 100% of that. And so I think one of the reasons you see authors go in that direction is it's just a different, totally different set of economics.
Okay. And you have also the community.
Yes.
Like community. And what's the role of this community in your life, in your business life?
Well, I mean, it's just humbling to be part of what's probably the largest grouping of followers of Stoicism ever in history. Like, that's just like Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome, but he didn't have access to, almost 500,000 Stoics that he could communicate with on a daily basis. Like, so it's insane, right? Like, it's just, I try not to think about it because it's so strange to me. But I think this goes to a point that's beneficial to people who are more than just authors. So many people have successful businesses, successful books, successful brands, but they don't actually have a direct relationship with their customer. Like, if you make food, you sell your food to, or let's say you like a nutrition bar. You sell that to retailers who then sell to customers. They have the relationship with the customer. If you make movies, you make the movie, you sell it to a studio who sells it to a distributor who sells it to a movie theater, and then I buy a ticket from the movie theater. And so publishing has been the same way for a long time. Like, I write the book, I sell the book to a publisher, the publisher sells it to a distributor who sells it to a bookstore who sells it to a customer. But with the challenges, let's say, I sell that to my fans. I have a community who I speak with on a daily basis. It's the first thing a lot of them check in the morning, and that's
yeah, I'm one of them.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Yeah, but if I only wrote books, I would not have that direct relationship with you. If I decided, hey, I'm doing a new edition of the Daily Stoic and I want to tell you about it, I would have to tell a person who tells a person who tells a person who hopes that you will come into their store one day. And so that's just, you always want to have as direct relationship with your customer as possible. Can you send them a letter? Can you send them an email? Can you send them a tweet? How can you communicate with them? And the fewer intermediaries between you and the delivery of that message, the better.
Okay, and you do this with your reading list as well?
Yeah, like I gave a talk yesterday to a bank here in Austin, and the guy who set up the talk had been on my reading list for 8 years. 9 years, something before I'd even published a book. And I'd had the idea to do the reading list because I knew one day I wanted to be an author, and I knew you would need an email list to market those books. But why would anyone sign up for my reading list? So or for my email list. So I came up with the idea of I would recommend books, and then one day in the future, I might recommend my own books, right? And so that's what I started doing. But just the idea that flash forward almost a decade, I would like the list makes a little bit of money from referrals or whatever, but the idea that I would be monetizing the list 9 years later with an in-person interaction because I've been delivering books, it's hard for people to think strategically like that, and I got a little lucky and it was somewhat accidental, but the point is, do you have a relationship with your customers? Can you communicate with them? And how are you cultivating this relationship on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, and find a way to do it without take your life, because
yes,
some people spend all the time speaking direct messages on Instagram, and they are doing this, but take the whole life.
Well, look, like the problem, so the delivery rate on an email is 100%. Maybe the open rate is 50%. But the delivery rate on a tweet is like 7%. Do you know what I mean? It's tiny. Yeah. And so same with Facebook. I mean, Facebook, like I'm going through this now with the book coming out. Like, if I want to reach all my Facebook fans, I have to give Facebook money.
A lot of money.
And so...
And Instagram is the same.
Yeah. I mean, look, the data on these platforms is very powerful and digital marketers are smart to take advantage of it. But if your job is to cultivate a community and a brand, you want as direct a relationship with that community as possible, and you want to own the real estate that it's on. You don't own your Facebook profile. Facebook can delete it. That Twitter can ban you.
Yeah, because
you know?
it's a media company.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care about you.
Yeah. A very nice thing about your work is that you pick deep concepts and show us in a very easy way through stories.
Yeah.
How do you do the research for the books and choose these stories that relate to each other, like Kennedy, Tiger Woods? I think that it's
I'm just
amazing.
always looking. I read really widely, and I try to always be noting down and recording the things that I like. I keep them on note cards. But the point is, like, you gather information and then you synthesize that information down until you notice patterns and similarities and connections. But this is why you have to have a diverse amount of interests to be, I think, a successful storyteller. If you're only fascinated with one thing, you just hit that note over and over again. You know, you have to like history and sports and science and popular culture and ordinary people and philosophy and so it's just about, you know, just keeping your eyes open and then you know, organizing what you find.
Okay. So thank you very much. It's amazing to chat with you.
Oh, thanks, man. This is cool.
And we are really excited to have you in Brazil.
Yeah,
Thank you
awesome,
very
man.
much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.